it doesn't work for everyone, but thank you for those that have been able to. It's lovely to see the sunshine pouring in through various windows around the county. So so let's have a think about active bystander. I've been running some workshops for a council who have really wanted to not just say great words about challenging bias, challenging poor behaviours. They wanted to really make sure that their staff really embraced standing up, whether it's against people not living by their values, whether it's any form of discrimination, whether it's bullying and bad behaviour. It was something that they felt was really important to do. And so I've run a series of workshops for them. And the powerful conversations that we've had, mainly out of small group sessions, have been amazing. So hopefully I can bring a few insights to you in a big group, just to give you a few tips on how you might stand up to something that you see that you typically feel isn't right. And I could fairly well guarantee that if you're feeling that way, there will be other people around you who are feeling that way too. So the theme of today is active bystander. And typically, a lot of the roots of the theories from recent times anyway come from universities, where there's been quite a worry about how vulnerable young people are, but how worried their friends and classmates might be about actually stepping in to help. But what I'm going to show you now, just to sort of help you have a little think about what this can mean, I'm going to share a video. It tries to illustrate how easy it is to do nothing if other people are around. So if you bear with me, hopefully this will come through on your screen.
Place like this street in New York City, if you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help! Help!
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help! Help me, please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is two conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help. And it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Four minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You alright? You alright?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You want to sit up?
She don't look well, does she?
You alright, yeah? Sure.
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm alright.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
Why you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so I'd just like to check that he was okay.
And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
Okay, hopefully that was resonated with a few of you, where maybe there'll have been times where you've noticed something that maybe other people have seen but just not done anything about it. And it is quite common that people choose not to be active. There might be many different reasons for that. So what I would love to do now is get you to just pop in the chat what might stop you taking action if you see something that you feel is wrong. It could be a situation like that where somebody needs help on the street, or there's a challenging interaction going on. But equally, it could be when you're in work and you see somebody maybe being a little bit bullying towards somebody else. Somebody might have used some inappropriate language, or they might be voicing quite biased opinions. But what sorts of things might stop you from being an active bystander? What would stop you doing something about it? And if you could pop your thoughts in the chat, that would be really helpful. Okay, so I've got possibly a fear of an aggressive response coming in. As well, if does anyone feel like they could actually say it out loud? I've got, if there was someone of authority, fear of
prejudice, I think.
Hi, Jackie, thank you.
Prejudice, I think, can stop you as well.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I said prejudice.
Prejudice. Yeah, so there might be prejudice that's coming into play, and things like what we call that. You know, we might have made an assumption, mightn't we? Somebody might have a hood up and they might have a staffy dog with them, and we'll have assumed that they're going to be a horrible, violent person just because of perhaps what they look like, for example. But thank you. Simone, do you want to pick any other comments out of the chat at all?
Sure. So we've got Victoria said in the workplace, we're encouraged to report this. Victoria says you wouldn't have intervened in situations like the ones on the video, I'm guessing, but some people may be scared, absolutely. Yeah. Lindsay says she's a bit of a busybody and normally do get involved. I have found myself in some dodgy situations. That's right, and fear can be one of the big ones, can't they?
Wow.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, would you like to share it? Would you be prepared to share a bit more about those dodgy situations that you might have been in?
Yeah, I do get involved. I often stop and in the streets in Cambridge and check people are all right. I don't like seeing people unhurt, but the worst, I did get in a really dodgy situation when a girl was being attacked by her boyfriend. I had my kids with me, and it was in the old Lion Yard. It was a long time ago, and I got involved. I went up to him and told him that he needed to stop what he was doing, and it was inappropriate to be doing that in the place. And I told her to go home. and it got really nasty, and he got her by the hair. So and it was in the days where we didn't all have mobile phones as well. It was sort of like, it was probably about 20 years ago. My kids were really little, and I know my youngest child was really scared, but I just held firm, and I really told him very strongly that he needed to stop what he was doing. And eventually I got some support because I had my kids with me, and but it took quite a long time. A lot of people did not want to get involved, and eventually they got the security in Lion Yard, and they managed to split the two of them up. But he was a very unsavory character. But I was then quite scared because I left and they let him go, and I really felt he was following me. So I went back to my car and went home. And I really thought, had I done the right thing? And I think I did, but it was very unnerving situation.
Wow, that was very powerful, Lindsay. Thank you. And we had an example of a similar-ish situation that a lady shared with us on one of the workshops, where she'd actually been attacked by 3 strangers at a bus station, and it was quite a busy bus station. And afterwards, somebody came over and said to her, you know, I wished, I'm really sorry, I did see what happened. I'd be happy to be a witness, but I was scared for my own safety, so I didn't get involved. And as we will talk through some of the theories in a little bit, and safety is absolutely a #1 consideration whenever thinking about being an active bystander. But what could have happened and did happen in your situation, Lindsay, is eventually maybe a few people group together and say, look, this isn't right. If there's more of us, we're more likely to be able to stop this. And that's probably what could have happened in that situation in the bus stop too, where a few people could have got together and said, you know, let's shout. But equally, there are some other techniques that we can use. So I'll share a little bit of the theory, and then we'll pause again for some discussions. So I'll pop my slides up on the screen for you.
Anita, can I let you know, Carolyn has posted in the chat, she said, I've been in a situation when standing in a queue and a man was clearly shoplifting. We could all see him, and I stood there looking at the people in the queue and no one was doing anything. Wow. So I spoke up and asked him to think about what he was doing with all of us watching. I felt everyone's eyes on me, but no one else said anything. The guy put the stuff back and left, but even the shopkeeper didn't seem to want to get involved. I was quite shocked and was a little worried when walking home that he might follow me. Amazing. Well done.
Well done. And I think the scary thing is, on the news, we hear about all sorts of things around maybe people who've like put a baby seat on the side of the street almost as a trap for somebody, or people distract others and then steal. So there are lots of times that you hear about what might happen if you go to try and help, but then something goes wrong. And what a pity that stories like that one don't get reported, that are successes of things that people, you know, successfully actually help somebody else. So what we're going to do, so thank you very much for that insight. It's a huge help to get out, so keep them coming, and I'll ask Simone to keep her eye on chat, because I'm not fabulous at multitasking to present and watch the chat at the same time. So what there are so many different situations where we could choose to act. It could be discrimination of any form, bad behaviour, perhaps someone who isn't living by our values, forms of bullying, and not just face to face. You know, there's all sorts of, you might actually see people who send quite bossy emails to people and copy everybody in instead of just sending it to the individual that they really need to address. You might actually stop and think, that's so unfair, and try and address something like that. You know, concern for the well-being of somebody, or even just tackling those low level things that somebody in the office might just do, that everyone ends up saying, oh, that's just Fred. But he's allowed to get away with it, and so it carries on and on and on. It might just be those inappropriate touches, it could be sort of that low level banter, but untackled, people then start to think that it's okay. And obviously recognizing that somebody's in possible danger is one of the things. And thank you so much for some of the comments that you've put in. Some of the reasons that we've found for people not intervening are many. Things like worrying for the safety of themselves or others. And we've definitely had a lot of examples where people will have said, I had my children with me, so I didn't think it was appropriate. But then equally others who said, I wanted my children to actually see that things aren't okay and that it is okay to speak up. So you'll have different perspectives depending on every different human being. There could be worry that that situation might be a trap. If you're in work, things like how do you protect those long-term relationships? If you're going to speak up against a colleague and perhaps tell them about something that you've seen that you felt was inappropriate, there's perhaps that worry that maybe they won't like you anymore, or they might not, that they might try to have some form of reprisal. So that's another possible thing that might stop people. They might just think they shouldn't get involved, or worry that they might not do the right thing. And fear of retaliation is another big thing. So that there's so many reasons why people might not intervene. But this phrase I thought was a lovely one. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And so, wherever possible, I'm going to spend the next few minutes or so just taking you through some of the theories, some of the things that you might choose to do. We can't go into any of it in huge detail, but the model called the 4 Ds, I feel, is nice and easy to remember, and it gives you 4 different things in your back pocket to pull out in any sort of situation. And please, if at any point you want to ask any questions, there is a reactions button. And that allows you to raise your hand as well. So again, it's hard to see everybody on the screen, but I'll ask Simone to keep a keen eye out just to see if there are any questions. Okay, so that situation that we talked about earlier with the gentleman and his partner, it's always important to really think about safety. Safety is something that is there to be thought about for yourselves, but also for those around you as well. Or perhaps in that situation, it went well, but could that person have become even more aggressive to their partner? Could they be even worse the next time they see them? So always try and think, what is safe? Is it safe to intervene? Know your own limits, and be really careful that if it's possible, get others involved. Look around, look at all those other bystanders and say, come on guys, surely we need to help here. That person's in danger. We need to help. Okay, but that help might not necessarily have to be from doing something absolutely by yourself and speaking up. So let me tell you about the model that we use. So the model that we use is called the 4 Ds. So, these are the things that you can have really to hand to think, okay, how might I tackle this particular situation? So the first D is what we call direct action. It's actually doing something yourself to tackle what's happening and to raise your concerns. It could well be that you want to go up to somebody, as they say, as you've witnessed them, say something very inappropriate to a colleague, and just wait until, you know, that might have happened, they've walked away. You could go over and say, excuse me, Fred, when I saw you say this to that person, I felt that was really inappropriate. You might not have meant it, but I saw their reaction, and I do, you know, and it was inappropriate for these reasons, and raise it as a comment there and then, taking direct action. We'll talk a little bit about maybe some of the techniques, like adopting an adult to adult methodology to actually tackle those sorts of discussions. So we'll have a little chat about, in a bit more detail, about direct action later. But that direct action is you choosing to do something about that situation live and in the moment, using assertive techniques, trying to operate in an adult to adult mode. I wonder, have any of you read the book The Chimp Paradox? I wonder whether if you could do any hands up or thumbs up, or so anyone that I can actually see. So again, in the Chimp Paradox, one thing that comes over loud and clear in that in the theories in that book is that our emotions work very, very quickly in our brain. And this book likens our emotions to a wild, primitive chimp in the jungle who instantly reacts in a way to either save themselves or feed themselves, etc. And that part of our brain works 5 times faster than the human part of the brain, as he puts it, which is more rational and more logical. So sometimes if you see a situation, the very first thing that will come through in your processing is that chimp, those emotions. It might be anger or distress or even upset. And sometimes it's always worth just allowing that human part of your brain to catch up, the rational parts of thinking, just to catch up before you do anything. So that's one quick tip on taking direct action. By all means act, but maybe just allow your rational human head to catch up with your emotions so that things come out across in a reasoned, logical and calm way. So that's direct action. The next one is distraction. And distraction can come in handy, potentially when there are situations where maybe you have witnessed a fight or something like that, or a scuffle somewhere. If you're far enough away, just shouting across to say, "Oi, what's going on there? Please stop," could possibly just stop people and help them realise, gosh, there are people, somebody's seen this, I best stop. They might even be calling the police. And I've had a few situations where people have shared they've seen kids bullying others in the park and just shouted over and said, please stop that. That's real, you know, whatever they might have shouted. And 9 times out of 10, some of the children have maybe run away and left them to it. But if you take this back to the workplace, another possible situation that you might come across is where maybe someone's walked out and started to have a go at somebody for doing a not a very good piece of work or something, but they're out in the office and that's not appropriate. So possibly there, the distraction technique might well be to go, oh, excuse me, Fred. I'll use Fred all the way through these themes, this character. Can I have a word? I just need a little bit of help. But anything just to and take them into another office or out of the way and just say, I'm really sorry to interrupt. However, I didn't think it was appropriate for you to be talking about that situation in front of everybody else. I hope you don't mind, but that's what I've done. So that's another possible methodology for the distraction technique. The next one that we have is the delegation. So in some situations, you may well feel that you are really not the best person to deal with that situation. If it's a situation that's outside, it's threatening, and it's now in the days where we do have mobile phones, it could well be that you're able to actually pick the phone up and phone the emergency services. So it could be that you make a decision that actually you need expert emergency service help. But again, if you come back to a workplace situation, it may be something that you need to raise with somebody's line manager. You might want to discuss it with your line manager. You want to maybe just check that you're feeling awkward about the way somebody's behaving, but are you the only one? So you might actually talk to some other people just to find out if it's just you or if it's actually others. So there could be other people that you turn to in that delegate box just to try to actually tackle the situation. And then finally, last but not least, is the delay button and the delay box. And that's where sometimes you may well feel that actually doing something right this minute, right now, isn't the best thing to do. It could be because of safety or worry of the impact of taking some form of action right now in front of others. So you may choose to delay what you do. You might wait to see a colleague that you think is being bullied after something that you've witnessed and just say, I saw this happen the other day. I felt like it was inappropriate. Are you okay? Is there any help? Can I point, is there anything I can do to help? It may be that you think about something and feel that you need to go to a line manager to say, I have witnessed this. I don't feel like it's appropriate. I want to be able to raise my concerns with you and to see whether you can do something about it. So they are the 4 different techniques that you can use. And basically, any of them mean that you've taken some form of action and you've not just stood by. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing right now. And in the chat, I'm going to put a link. So what I'd like you to do now is follow that link if you could. And that's going to take you to something called Mentimeter. What I'm asking you to do is rate along a scale how comfortable you would feel with each of those 4 Ds. So hopefully, can I get some reactions on the thumbs up just to see that you can get to it? Yeah, okay. So I'll let you have a go at that, and then in a second I'll share my screen again and we can have a look at the results. Oh, we've got some nice ranges going on here.
You're feeling the power, Anita, that you can see what's happening and we can't yet.
So can you see that, Simone, there? Yeah, is it all? Can you see it on your screen, my screen now? Yeah, here we go. Okay. Just a few more results coming in. There we are then. So looking at this, we've got direct action, which is just ever so slightly lower scoring than the others. Quite a range though, really. I think the most popular is sort of the 8 people who actually feel fairly confident to use that direct action, but a few sort of more along the middle of that scale and towards the end. I'm wondering if any of you in that group of 8 might feel comfortable to say why they might feel, I'll just stop sharing for a second, why you might feel comfortable to take direct action and what tips you might use. Anyone willing to give me? Kat, thank you.
Hi. I think I'm quite an outspoken person, and so, you know, taking the example that Lindsay gave, I don't think I would be able to walk by and see somebody being attacked either. I'd feel compelled to help even if nobody else was there. I think it'd probably be a little bit more difficult in the workplace to speak out because of people being more authoritative than I am, and I think it would depend on who it was. But I certainly feel confident enough in the street to be able to say something. But yeah, I just think it depends on the situation you're in.
Definitely. And it's funny, sorry, Jackie, you've come off
No,
mute.
I'm saying I agree with Kat. Exactly. In the street, you feel proud take more direct action than you would perhaps in a work environment. Yeah. I kind of gave myself that mid score, because I thought in the street, yes, I would be very direct, perhaps in a situation like that, because there's no waiting. However, in a work environment, I think I'll probably not, because of what might come out of it, the way I will handle myself. Perhaps if I did a direct, I might actually make a situation more negative than actually more positive if I took a direct action in a work environment. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's that worry, isn't there? You've got a long-term relationship to have with people. And it's interesting, I suppose, in your professional capacity in work. So for example, if I'm working with a group of social workers or carers, for example, they may well, with all their policies and procedures and practices and professional way of operating, they'll feel fine to actually be an active bystander in their professional capacity. But then when it's with colleagues and hearing maybe their banter or something that their colleagues are doing, that's where the challenge comes in quite a lot more, because it's about how do you know, you're a colleague of theirs, aren't you? And you want to protect that relationship, but equally it's important that they know that what they're doing is inappropriate. Okay, I'm going to go back now just to have a little look at the rest of those scores. So just back a second. The distract technique was one that actually had, and the delay technique were the ones that had the very confident to use buttons clicked. So again, anybody happy to give me an idea about a distract that they might have had in their mind when they were going to when they marked it in that way? I'm going to stop sharing so as we can see the screen. Any thoughts or ideas? Just checking the chat as well. What might make you feel comfortable, or what situation would you use a distract?
I like the one that you were saying about shouting at the kids in the park. You know, you can just use your voice, and then it doesn't matter how big or strong or tall or fast you are. You could just, you know, and hope for the best. But in a work environment, I've never had to do, or yeah, I can't think of an occasion where I've done that in a work environment. I don't know if anybody else has.
In a work environment, I suppose you could certainly, I think a cup of tea always breaks it. I think when things are getting a bit tense, anyone a cup of tea?
Yes, to say that, Jackie. So it is one of my ladies in a workshop last week was very much, I use the cup of tea. People are getting a bit heated. We're in work, so I just go, oh, anyone fancy a brew? And it's just something. Lindsay, you came off mute too.
No, I think in the workplace, I think the distract method is actually really appropriate, because like you said just now, you can just go and say, well, should we go and take a break? And I mean, I'm a senior manager, and we have some conflict sometimes in our management meetings, and we always have an off button where we'll have a break. We'll say, should we just take a break now, and it's healthy conflict. It's nothing nasty, you know. It's good conflict. But and I think in the workplace, you know, if you see something, it's easy just to say I think the example you gave earlier was really perfect, where if you're not happy about somebody's behaviour, you can just go and interrupt and say, could you just help me a moment, and then just take them off into a quiet place to have a discreet word. I think they're really helpful tips that you can have. Yeah.
Thank you. It is. It's always hard, and if you've got professionalism, rules, procedures, you name it behind you, and you deliver in your day job to others, it can be very easy to just do that direct action and just, you know, go with it. Whereas, like you say, when it's with colleagues, even though you are all great professionals at what you do, sometimes you're not always professional with each other. And that's where sometimes that needs pulling out. And yes, sometimes it might be, let's just distract it and take people's minds off things. I had a gentleman who said he used to work in a car dealership, and he was the one that was responsible for anything that had gone wrong with a vehicle, and they were luxury vehicles. And so the technique he had been told about was, when he got like some really angry customers, you know, that chimp that I was talking about earlier is running riot, they're having a real go at him because of this car, and how dare he, you know, how dare they give him they sell them a car that's so bad, la la la. And his technique was, I really want to take this seriously. I can see you're very, you know, you're very angry. I want to be sure that I don't miss anything. So please just give me a minute. I want to go away. I'm just going to get a pen and paper so as I can capture everything that you want, everything that you say, so I don't miss anything. And I'll be back in a second. And the technique really was just that whole distraction for them to, you know, hopefully in those few minutes whilst he went away, hopefully he didn't have a pen and piece of paper in his hand at the time, but in that few seconds or whatever, that you just go away, get your pen, get your piece of paper and come back, that human part of those individuals' brains hopefully is caught up. They've maybe thought, oh God, I was going at him a bit much. He really does want to help. So how can he, you know, what I best start talking to him in a bit of a better way. And then just by having a pen and a piece of paper, it was a way of just allowing people's emotions to just be taken seriously, but in a much more controlled way. Okay, I'm going to just go very briefly back to some of the techniques that you might want to use, more so in that direct action box. That's the one that often requires you to be firm and be assertive. So we haven't got a lot of time left, but I'll just give a few very quick tips. So we did have that first one, and some of the ones that we've said already around, oh, could you just take 5 minutes and take someone to one side? We've had the try and be a little bit, wait for a few seconds until your chimp inside has calmed down a little bit before you step in. But let's just have a little think about some other tips. So that direct action is really trying to act immediately, and definitely wherever you can, focus on the behaviour and don't make things personal. My daughter's terrible at saying to me, oh, you're too emotional, or you're this, or you're that. And she turns things into a personal statement. And one of the first things I then do is feel like attacked personally. If you can focus on the behaviour, what did you see and what impact did it have? Almost holding a mirror up, it's by far the best way to operate. So you're trying to head down a pathway that is calm, focused, rational and logical, which is what I would determine as an assertive approach. You're not being overly apologetic and saying, oh, I'm ever so sorry, and you probably didn't mean it. And, you know, the sort of things that you might do when you're at a restaurant and the waiter comes over and says, oh, are you having a lovely meal? And many of us probably end up going, oh, yes, thank you very much, it's lovely. When actually we're thinking it's a bit cold, it's not been seasoned very well, or whatever it is. But sometimes we just choose to take that passive approach. And even in some of these situations, you can be so apologetic and you probably didn't mean it and this and that, that you lose the power of playing back what you actually saw. But what you do have to be careful of is that you don't then pop into that aggressive box where you've acted a bit too fast, your emotions have kicked in and you're too forceful, and that gives an aggressive form of behaviour or response, which can actually then, I'll just flick past that one, that can actually then make it harder for a person to respond back in a way that's rational and logical to you. And that's maybe where you get into more of a dangerous situation. So if you're aggressive, they're more likely to be aggressive back at you. So the last one that I thought I'd talk about here is transactional analysis. I managed to say that. I normally get completely tongue-tied in the word analysis. How many, let's have a, can you use the reactions button to actually see if you've come across this theory before? It's some thumbs up or not, or it's one of the, it's a theory that I have found very, very, very useful. And this gentleman, Eric Berne, looked at situations and realised that we as human beings exist in three different states. Firstly, the parent, the adult, and the child. And if we're in our parent state, there are two different modes that we can operate within. We can be doing a positive parent state, which is all about trying to look after people and keep them safe and be supportive. But in that negative parent state, you can be seen as controlling, critical, patronising, bossy, basically. The adult state, which we're all capable of, even as children, is that reasonable, logical, rational, and non-threatening sort of state. And then our child state is one where either we can be curious and playful and creative, but on that negative side, we can be rebellious, show tantrums, be difficult, and perhaps feel insecure. I'll come off that graphic now, just so as I can see the screen. So the theory is, if we act like a bossy parent, we are most likely to get a reaction as if someone is a naughty child. So if we go in being, but you shouldn't have done that, and why this, and so I see this on the flip side in our house, where my daughter will come in and say, Mum, why haven't you washed my black leggings? They've been in the wash basket for days now. So my natural response is, but I'm not the only one who has to do the washing in our house. She is 19, by the way, just in case you, you know, why is it always me that has to do it? You know, you could do it. So I basically spit all my dummy out and throw all my toys out of the pram, because I'm now acting like a naughty child because of the way that I was treated by someone who was acting like a bossy parent. So wherever possible, even if you're really quite disgusted with what you've seen or the behaviour that you've witnessed or what you've heard, wherever possible, try to approach it as a rational, logical adult. And ask, especially if it's a workplace situation, where actually maybe those behaviours are carrying on too much and that cup of tea distraction didn't work, or maybe worked once, it might have worked twice, but it's carrying on and it's still not stopping. That's the time where you may be needing, in an adult to adult way, to say, hold on a minute, I see this happening in quite a few of our meetings. That makes me feel uncomfortable. That's another tip. If you can bring something to how you feel, people can't argue with that, because that's how you feel. So you can say, you know, that makes me feel really uncomfortable, and I'd really like to have a discussion about this to see if we're together, we can find a good way to stop it happening. And hopefully, because you've addressed that in an adult-like way, you'll get an adult-like response back. Okay, that is my variety of very quick whistle-stop tour tips on how to really try to approach a situation, whether you feel comfortable to tackle it yourself directly, or whether you want to think about one of those other Ds by delegating, by distracting, or actually by delaying, but then taking action, whether that might be after the delay piece, you might then choose whichever of the three options is the best one to pick to tackle the situation. But I wanted to just leave a little bit of time for questions or anything that has anyone got a situation that they would be brave enough to say, I've got this one right now and I'm not sure what I would do. What we'd normally do in these workshops is we have lots of different breakout sessions, and in the afternoons we do a 1 hour coaching session where there's only 3 or 4 people involved, and that way we say, right, you've heard the theory in the morning, now let's have a look at you know, your situation. So here we go. How would you tackle a parent that was beating their child? Wow, yeah, that's a very difficult situation, isn't it? Because it's their child. But again, as an adult, you'd have to calm your responses. You'd have to calm your emotion, because I would imagine if I saw that, I would feel really quite aggressive. And you would have to, I feel like it is more than appropriate in that situation to say, excuse me, please, that child is very small, you are very big, this is that's very inappropriate, please stop. And you might want to say, and if they give you a whole lot of abuse back, like, oh, you want to try and be the parent of this child or whatever. I mean, again, you could always say, I don't even know if you're that child's parent. And so if you were the parent of that child, you'd want me to intervene, wouldn't you? So there's some possible things that you could try to do. You'd hope that might just get them to realise what they're doing. You might then need the delay technique if it does, sorry, the delegate technique by calling the authorities, because that's certainly not an appropriate thing to do. Does that give you answer, Victoria? Any thoughts that you've got yourself at all?
This has haunted me forever, because it actually happened in a queue at Legoland, and there were masses and masses of people there, and my daughter was very young at the time, so I decided to be the passerby. I mean, they were both parents, looked very, very threatening as well. So, but I just so wish that I'd actually said something and had the courage to actually say something, because it was totally, I mean, he was beating the little boy. He wasn't just smacking his bottom.
Yeah, and that's one of the, thank you so much for sharing that, Victoria, because one of the impacts of not actually becoming that active bystander is that thing that lives with you for quite a long time. You know, on the workshops, I've had so many people say, this happened 10 years ago, or, you know, and it's haunted them, as I think you used that word.
Yes, yeah.
Because you've always thought, I wished I'd done something, you know, but again, in that situation, you weren't the only person, and people always do worry a bit that, you know, is it their business? That parent belongs to that child belongs to that parent. Trying to say, come on, this isn't how we do things in this, you know, it's in these, I can't condone seeing you hitting a young child. Please stop. Even that, even back to it's making me feel very uncomfortable and very worried for their safety. Again, they can't argue about how you feel. They could, though. It sounds like that particular character would very happily have said, you can F off, it's nothing to do with
absolutely.
Blah, blah, blah. But I suppose at least you would have had that opportunity to say something. But it's hard, and it's a perfect illustration of how hard it actually can be to do, because there's always some reason that you think, well, is it my place, and is it something that I should? Thank you.
I'm sure if I hadn't had my daughter with me, I probably would have said something, but then am I using that as an excuse? You know, as I say, I keep berating myself for not getting involved. But
oh, bless you, Victoria.
Well, don't, Victoria, though, at least now you think if it happened again, you know exactly what you'd do, and it's sort of, and that's sometimes, you know, times and places and situations come into play. So you need to, we'll let you get that one. Wrap it up in a ball and throw it away.
Throw it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. Ashley, I've heard, oh, sorry, I've just lost the chat from in front of me. Heard much aggression to do with COVID and people in queues standing too close and wearing face masks. Yes, that is a hot topic at the moment. Whether it's on trains where a group of I know I was on a train a while back and a group of youngsters came and sat next to me, and two of them, well, three of them actually were wearing the mask, but the other one wasn't. And you're always in that thought of, well, are they exempt from this? But am I making my own judgment that surely they're not, because they look fit and well and healthy, and I think they're just being rude and arrogant and disrespectful, or like you say, in the queues. And again, I think the only way to try to approach those sort of things is in that adult plane as well. So rather than going, oh, give me some space in an aggressive way, it's just, you know, do you mind? I am really worried about this situation. Could you please give a little bit more space? You know, someone in the shop's taken gone to great lengths to mark things on the floor. Can we please just give me a bit of space? But in a, you know, in a nice, non-threatening way, rather than that, you know, that natural thing that you'd first do, which is, wow, leave me, don't stand so close. There's a song about that somewhere by the Police, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Okay, can I, oh, I've got someone, so we've got someone who's, yeah, and I am conscious we are totally out of time.
Oh, bless you.
So,
well, Anita, thank you so much on behalf of all of us and the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce. Thank you very much indeed. A very important topic, and as Melanie said as she's been leaving. And something that I'm sure will come up again in another discussion. Ladies and gents, can I please remind you that there are two additional International Women's Day /Week events taking place this week. On Wednesday, we'll be looking at the 50 ways to address bias. We've got that being presented by a chamber member on Claire at 10:30 on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we have a panel discussion with some fantastic guests looking at women on boards, why still so few? So even with all of the progress that has been made with gender equality, the boards of our top businesses and even the smaller ones are still not showing that gender parity. So please have a look on the Chambers website for those. I always love to give speakers a little round of applause for those that I can see. So if you could join me with Anita, and if you'd like any other information about anything that we're doing with regards to the Business Women's Group or anything that the Chambers are doing, Sadie and her team are there to help you. We wish you a wonderful rest of International Women's Day and take care of yourselves. Thank you so much. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.